It began the night the moon bled silver over Larkmere Lake, a lonely place, hemmed in by black pines and shadows older than maps. I wasn't supposed to be there. My GPS had long since given up, and the road had turned from pavement to gravel, then to dirt, then to nothing at all. But there I was, sleep-deprived and dazed, drawn by something I still can't explain. The trees bent inward like they were guarding a secret, and between their trunks, I saw the glint of water, a dark mirror reflecting nothing. The lake didn't ripple, not even in the breeze. That was the first thing that should have told me something was wrong. I stepped closer, feet sinking slightly into the dew-soaked grass, when I heard it, a sound so soft it could have been wind or memory. It was a song, almost, or something like a lullaby hummed by someone who'd forgotten how to smile. The melody pulled at something inside me, something ancient and tender and wounded. My skin broke into gooseflesh. Then I saw her. She stood at the end of a warped, half-rotted dock, her back to me. Long black hair clung to her back like ink bleeding through parchment. She was barefoot, pale, and dressed in something that shimmered, not wet, not dry, just wrong. The mist pooled around her ankles like obedient dogs, and though I could only see her from behind, I felt the weight of her sadness like a hand pressed to my chest. I don't remember choosing to walk forward, only that my feet moved. A crow somewhere cawed sharply and fled into the trees. The lament grew louder, clearer, an aching voice that didn't come from her mouth, but from the air itself. I wanted to call out, ask if she was all right, but the words lodged in my throat like swallowed glass. Every instinct screamed to run. But she turned. Her face was not tragic. It was hollow. As if grief had worn through skin and muscle and left behind something sculpted from sorrow alone. And her eyes, God help me, her eyes, were wells with no bottom, flickering with images not my own. A boy falling through ice. A mother screaming beside a cradle. Lovers burning in a barn. I saw these things, each in an instant, and yet each felt like I'd lived them. She opened her mouth, and her voice did not come out. Mine did. I said, "Why did you leave me?" And then the lake stirred. She stepped from the dock with a grace that betrayed gravity, her bare feet making no sound on the wood. The air grew heavier with each inch she moved closer, as though the lake itself held its breath. I should have run. Screamed. Prayed. But her eyes, they held me fast, not with terror, but with a kind of sorrow so deep it made me ashamed to look away. She wasn't crying, not exactly. The tears didn't fall. They clung to her cheeks like droplets of molten glass, glinting with fractured color in the moonlight. I saw blues that bled into greens that bled into reds I'd never seen before, each tear holding a story, a memory, a death. And in those tears, I saw my own face. Not how I was now, but how I might have been had I made every wrong choice, hurt every person who ever loved me, and forgotten how to grieve. I saw myself kneeling in wet soil, digging frantically. I saw blood on my hands, and a name scratched into wood, my name, weathered by rain and years. My mouth trembled with questions I didn't know how to ask. She reached out, not to touch, but to show. The moment her fingertips hovered near my chest, I felt it. Not a touch of flesh, but a memory forced into me like a hot iron through the ribs. I saw her then, really saw her. A girl in white, running through a fog-soaked field. The whisper of reeds brushing against her. A hand grabbing her ankle beneath the surface of the water. Screaming into a mouthful of mud. The lake had taken her. But she hadn't died. Not properly. Something about the way she looked at me now made my blood turn to sleet. She was showing me more, images cascading through my mind like a film reel spun too fast. I saw people, dozens of them, all lost. All drawn to her just as I had been. Some cried. Some laughed. One simply walked into the water and never came back. They were still there. Beneath the surface. Trapped. Watching. Listening. The girl, if she was ever truly human, whispered something then, so quiet the wind had to hush for it to be heard. I couldn't understand the words, but they burrowed into my chest like seeds. And when I blinked, I was crying too. My tears weren't stained glass. They were dark. Murky. Lake water. The air around us thickened, trembling with her wordless murmur. It wasn't quite music, nor prayer, but something older than either, like the sound water makes when mourning something it can't forget. It seeped into my ears, into my breath, into the marrow of my bones, until I no longer heard it with my ears but with my blood. I took a step forward. Then another. The lake pulsed beneath the dock as if it had begun to breathe, exhaling fog that curled around my feet like smoke from a forgotten altar. She was retreating, no longer approaching me but returning to the water, drifting backward with that same unnatural grace, her eyes never leaving mine. Her voice grew louder the farther she moved, but the distance between us shrank. There was no splash when her heels touched the water. No ripple. Just a silent parting of the surface as she slid into it like a dream turning to nightmare. I followed her. Not with my feet, not entirely. Part of me remained on the shore, body stiff, skin clammy, eyes wide and unfocused. But something deeper, something vital and unnamed, stepped forward. I felt the pull, gentle but absolute, like the last breath before sleep. Her melody wrapped around me like silk, until it began to tighten. That's when the cold came. Not the cold of winter air or icy water, but the ancient, choking cold of forgotten depths. Tendrils, slick and unseen, coiled around my spirit, first curious, then possessive. I tried to scream, but the sound died somewhere between breath and thought. I could feel fingers, not mine, sifting through my memories. Searching. Sampling. And she was there, just beneath the surface, lips moving beneath the water in reverse. Her hair floated like smoke, eyes wide and unblinking. Her skin began to crack, and behind it, I saw something alive. I understood then that the girl on the dock had never been alone. She was a vessel. A voice. A baited hook. And I, like so many before, had bitten. The water reached up, not just physically, but through me. I felt it in my veins, in the spaces between heartbeats. I couldn't tell where my soul ended and the lake began. The world above seemed distant now, no trees, no stars, no name. Only her voice. Calling me home. I awoke at the lake's edge. Clothes soaked. Skin raw. The dock behind me was gone, as if it had never existed. Just water now, and the hush of windless trees. At first, I believed I had survived something unspeakable. A hallucination, perhaps. A fevered dream birthed by exhaustion. But then the sky bent, just slightly, like a smile hiding behind the clouds. And I knew. She had not let me go. She had become me. I walk now, not in flight, but in compulsion. The lake is always near. Even when I'm miles from it, I find puddles that never dry. I hear dripping in rooms with no pipes. My mirror fogs though I haven't bathed. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I wake up soaked from the inside out. And I hum. Her song. Strangers hear it too. Their heads tilt slightly when I pass them. Children cry, but they never know why. Dogs refuse to follow me. And when I speak, sometimes the words come out backwards. I avoid sleep. But dreams no longer need me to be sleeping. I see her now in reflections. Not just water, windows, glass, polished spoons. She stares with those eyes that know too much, and when I blink, she's mouthing things I haven't yet thought. There are days I forget my own name. Other days, I remember names that were never mine, names of those who walked the dock before me. Their final thoughts echo in my skull like trapped birds. Some weep. Some scream. One just laughs, endlessly. And I understand. There is no escape. Not from her. Not from the lake. The lament is not a sound, but a thread stitched into reality, pulling gently until the seams of self unravel. Sometimes I meet people who ask me what's wrong. They say I look familiar. I want to warn them. To shout run. But all I can offer is a smile I don't remember making, and a tune hummed through waterlogged lungs. Last week, I returned to Larkmere. I don't recall the drive. I only know I stood again at the shoreline. The moon bled silver. And she was waiting. But this time, when I stepped into the water, no one watched. Because I already was the girl on the dock. And she was me. They say the lake forgets nothing. But I had tried my best to forget it. 15 years had passed since I last saw those waters, black and still like a mirror under the moon. I was just a child when my cousin Thomas vanished beneath the surface. 1 minute we were skipping stones, and the next, he was gone. No splashing, no scream. Just ripples fanning out where he had stood. They never found his body. My aunt said the lake took him and wouldn't give him back. Now, I had returned. The cabin still stood at the edge of the lake, its paint peeled and its windows sun-bleached and blind. No one in the family had touched it since that summer, and stepping onto the warped front porch felt like stepping into a memory that had been buried too shallow. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and silence. The furniture stood exactly as we'd left it, board games half-played, a soda can long-dried and rusted on the table. I could almost hear our childhood laughter echoing between the walls, but it faded as I looked out through the window. The lake was unchanged. Still. Too still. It sat under a sky the color of bruised iron, and though the trees whispered in the wind, the surface of the water didn't move. Not a ripple. Not even from the loons that once called at dusk. There were no birds. No insects. No frog song. Just silence. I should have turned back. But something in me, some dumb, aching need to understand, kept me there. That night, I found Thomas's old flashlight tucked in a drawer. The plastic had cracked with age, but it still flickered to life when I hit the switch. I stood at the edge of the dock, the beam cutting a pale scar across the black water. Nothing. I turned to go, but stopped. There were footprints. Wet ones. Leading from the lake to the cabin door. Small. Child-sized. Barefoot. I hadn't been near the water. And I was alone. That night, the wind died completely. You don't realize how loud the world usually is until it stops. No crickets. No rustling leaves. Even the trees stood stiff and silent, like something was watching and they dared not breathe. I couldn't sleep. The silence pressed too hard against the windows. Around midnight, I walked back to the dock, Thomas's old flashlight in hand. The beam danced nervously ahead of me, making the shadows twitch and stretch in unnatural ways. When I reached the water, I paused. There, just there, ripples were forming on the lake's surface. Small, concentric rings expanding outward from the exact center. But there was no breeze. No fallen branch. No fish breaking the tension. I knelt slowly, squinting into the dark. That's when I saw it. A shadow, just beneath the water, pacing left to right. Its shape was familiar. Human. It mirrored my own outline with eerie precision, every turn of the head, every shift of weight. When I lifted my arm, it lifted its own. When I leaned in, it did too. But the water wasn't reflecting me. It wasn't shimmering like glass, and there were no stars or moonlight to bounce off the surface. This was beneath the water. A silhouette swimming just below the top layer, always keeping itself directly aligned with me. Perfectly synchronized, like a puppet under glass. My skin prickled. I took a cautious step back. It didn't. It stayed at the edge of the dock, watching from underneath. Motionless now. I whispered Thomas's name before I could stop myself. And it smiled. The shape below the water, my shape, curled its lips into a grin I did not make. I hadn't moved. But it had. That's when the water began to boil, gently, like something rising. I ran. Not because I saw what it was. But because I knew it would follow. I should have left that night. I should have packed my bag, broken the lock on the front gate if I had to, and driven until the trees were gone and the air didn't taste like old water and memory. But I stayed. And the lake knew I would. The next morning was gray, the kind of pale overcast that makes everything look faded and wrong, like a dream you can't quite remember right. I didn't eat. I didn't speak. There was no one to speak to. But I watched. Every hour, I returned to the dock, like something tethered me to it. The water stayed glass still each time, until I leaned in. That was when I first saw them. The eyes. Not my reflection. No. The shape beneath the surface was still there, hovering inches below. But now it wasn't just a shadow. It had features. Faint at first, like they were being sketched from memory, but they sharpened with each passing moment I stared. It looked like me. But not the me that stood on the dock. This version of me was soaked, hair floating weightless around a bloated face, lips pale and cracked, skin tinged gray-blue. Dead skin. Drowned skin. And its eyes, my eyes, were open. Wide. Alert. Staring up at me with something between pleading and possession. When I leaned closer, it did too. Our noses almost touched, separated only by the thin membrane of the lake's surface. I couldn't breathe. Then it blinked. I hadn't. I stumbled back, heart thudding, legs weak. I fell onto the dock, nearly rolling into the water. When I scrambled to my feet, the lake was empty again, no eyes, no shape, nothing. Just smooth, black silence. But the air had changed. It was wet inside the cabin when I returned. Damp prints led from the door to my bed. The mirror in the hallway had fogged as if someone had just stepped from a hot shower. I hadn't turned the water on. I sat in silence for hours, waiting for something to move again. But nothing did. Until I lay down to sleep. And felt breath on the back of my neck. I left at first light. Didn't pack. Didn't shut the cabin door. Just grabbed the keys and drove like the devil himself was crouched in the back seat, and maybe he was. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. Not once. I knew what I'd see if I did. A second face. Mine, but wrong. By the time I reached the highway, the woods had thinned out and the sun was trying to claw its way through the clouds. That should have calmed me. It didn't. Because it had followed. At the first gas station, I splashed water on my face in the restroom. I looked up. The mirror showed me dripping wet, still wet. Hair matted to my skull, lakeweed coiled like veins along my jawline. But when I reached up to touch, my fingers were dry. I blinked. So did the thing in the mirror. A second too late. I backed away, heart hammering, but I didn't scream. What was the point? I drove through 4 states, stayed in hotels packed with people, thinking maybe proximity would keep it at bay. But it's not the kind of thing that needs privacy. The puddles in the parking lot, it stared up through them. In the fog on the window beside my bed, its handprint appeared next to mine. Even the TV screen, off and black, held its reflection long after mine had moved away. I haven't slept more than a few hours since that day. Not really. Because here's the truth, the lake never let me leave. My body did. My car did. My shadow followed. But something stayed in those waters, and something else came back in its place. Now, when I pass a window, sometimes I don't recognize myself. Sometimes. I'm already standing in the reflection, waiting for my body to catch up. And sometimes, I catch it smiling before I do. The lake remembers. And now, so does every surface that dares reflect me. I am never alone. I am never alone. I am never alone. It started with an email from a volunteer site. Historic lakeside camp seeking help with restoration. Room and board included. Solitude and peace guaranteed. I didn't need peace. I needed distance, from the noise of the city, from a life slowly unraveling. So I packed light and headed north, toward a lake no one seemed to name. The drive felt like slipping between pages of a forgotten book. The road narrowed, then turned to gravel, then to earth, and finally disappeared beneath pine needles and moss. When I arrived, the lake was silent, breathing mist, untouched as if time had been kept out. Cabin sagged, dock warped, windows broken but not shattered. Still, it felt watched. Camp Dusk. The sign above the gate hung by a single nail, swinging lazily like a metronome for ghosts. I was the only one there. Or so I thought. I set up in what once must have been the staff cabin. Clean sheets. Dried flowers on the windowsill. That was the first thing that didn't make sense. Who? I spent the first day sweeping glass and clearing cobwebs from the mess hall. The second day I found the letters. They were tucked in drawers, beneath floorboards, jammed behind loose beams. All written in the same cramped, looping script, my script. Same handwriting I used for grocery lists and notes to myself. No envelopes. No dates. No recipients. The campers don't sleep. They just pretend. I saw one breathing under my bed. If you hear the flute, don't follow the sound. That's not music. That's how it finds you. The song. I can't remember it. But my hands know. Each letter was signed, me. Just that. Me. I didn't remember writing any of it. But the ink was fresh. My fingerprints smudged one of them. I tried to laugh it off. Thought maybe the camp had staged something creepy as a tourism gimmick. But who would do that for an empty camp in the woods, with no visitors? That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was scared, but because the lake hummed. Low and deep, like something ancient beneath the water was tuning an instrument. And outside, past the edge of the dock, I saw a tiny figure. No taller than a child. Drenched, barefoot. Staring. Waiting. The next morning, her footprints were still there. Wet. And pointed toward my cabin. On the third morning, I found footprints inside the mess hall. Small. Bare. Wet. They started at the door, not leading in, but out. As if something had been waiting inside the whole night. I followed them past upturned chairs and broken tables, and they ended at the piano against the far wall. I hadn't touched it yet. Its keys were yellowed, some missing. But when I stood near it, a chill passed over me, and the seat creaked. No one was there. And then it started. That night, as I lay beneath a moth-bitten quilt, I heard laughter. Thin, wind-worn, distant. The kind of laughter you don't want to investigate. But it came closer. Then, whispers. Come sing. I sat up. Shadows danced outside my window, too small to be adult, too strange to be safe. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped onto the porch. The lake glimmered with a pale sheen, unnatural in its stillness. And there they stood. Children. 8 or 9 of them. Boys and girls, all damp like they just climbed from the water, hair slicked to their foreheads, clothing decades out of place, shorts too short, dresses stitched by hand, no shoes. Their eyes, not glowing. Just wrong. Flat. Reflective, like water under moonlight. One girl stepped forward. Her voice was delicate but cracked like old wood. Sing the lullaby. Please. I opened my mouth to say I didn't know any lullaby, but my throat tightened. Instead, my hands moved. I wasn't holding anything, but my fingers curled, pressed invisible strings, stroked phantom keys. And I heard it. Soft and low, a tune rising from the air around me. My body swayed like I'd played it 100 times. Each note felt, remembered. Like muscle memory from another life. The children listened. Their faces softened, eyes glacier. Some closed their eyes. A boy began to hum along, his lips blue, skin translucent where moonlight kissed him. When the song ended, they clapped. Not like children. Like puppets. The girl spoke again. You played it wrong. Then, they turned in unison and walked back toward the lake. Except they didn't walk. They floated, just inches above the ground. Back to the water. And into it. Without a ripple. I stared long after they vanished. And then I noticed something. My hands wouldn't stop playing. The piano didn't exist in the morning. I ran to the mess hall to make sense of what I'd played, to prove it wasn't a dream, but the piano was gone. Not broken, not moved. Just, as if it had never been there. In its place was an old wooden chair, overturned and rotting. The ground beneath it was damp. That was when the dream started, or visions. I'm not sure which. I'd wake up at midnight with smoke in my throat, eyes stinging, ears echoing with laughter. Not the children's laughter this time. Older. Sharper. Watching. On the 5th night, I found the fire pit. I hadn't seen it before. And I would've. It was massive, stones blackened by old flame, logs stacked neatly, dry despite the dew. At its center, a pile of ash that never scattered in the wind. When I stepped closer, the ashes breathed. A whisper curled up from the pit. "Feed it." I backed away. But when I returned to the cabin, something was gone. My reflection in the mirror didn't mimic me. It stood a beat too long, smiled too wide. I blinked, and it was back to normal. But something in me wasn't. The next night, the fire pit blazed to life on its own. No wind. No spark. Just a sudden whoosh of blue flame, not orange, not natural. The children stood around it, silent, eyes locked on me. I couldn't see where they ended and the smoke began. One of them held out my journal, the one I kept under my pillow. I hadn't left it behind. But there it was. "Feed it." The girl again. Voice cracked, urgent. I took the journal and tossed it into the flame. Blue fire licked the pages, devouring them in seconds. I felt it. A burn behind my eyes. A tightening in my chest. Something left me. Some memory. Gone. Irretrievable. And yet, I stayed. Each night after, the fire returned. Each night, they brought me something to burn, photos, clothes, bits of writing I didn't recognize until I touched them and realized they were mine. Pieces of me I didn't even remember losing. But when I dropped them into the flame, I felt it leave, like feeding a hunger that lived in the ash. Now when I sleep, I see a great mouth in the lake center. Not teeth. Just a ring of smooth stone, pulsing, humming, breathing in ash and memory. And each night, I forget a little more of who I was. But I remember the song. Always the song. It's quiet now. The kind of quiet you don't find in the world beyond the trees. Out there, silence is just a pause between noises. But here, at Camp Dusk, silence is a presence. It watches. It waits. The children don't come to the fire anymore. They wait in the lake. I see their eyes beneath the surface, round, luminous, too many of them. Some nights they rise just enough that the water seems to blink. I no longer sleep. I don't need to. The last time I dreamt, I saw myself from above, sitting by the fire pit, humming that lullaby. My own voice didn't sound like mine anymore. It echoed too long, like it came from beneath stone, or water, or something much deeper. They say memory fades with time. But time doesn't pass here. Not in the way you remember it. There are only arrivals. I don't recall the path that brought me. I don't remember the person I was before I first played the song. But the lake remembers. And now, it sends others. A car will roll up the dirt path every so often, never too frequently, never too long. A new volunteer steps out, backpack slung over their shoulder, wide-eyed, ready to escape their broken life. I watch from the shadows at the edge of the trees, remembering a time when I walked that path the same way. They always say the same thing. This place wasn't on the map. I greet them gently. I show them the cabins. The mess hall. The fire pit. I never warn them. But I do ask if they play piano. Their answer doesn't matter. When night falls, the keys appear. The children return. The fire rises. The lake listens. And if the new volunteer resists, the lake gives them a name. Not the one they carried here, no. The lake assigns a name. One they'll never remember choosing, but it will feel like theirs. Just like I don't recall what mine once was. Now I sign everything me. Like the letters I found. Like the letters they'll find after me. I teach them the lullaby. Not through words, but through hands. Through remembering something they never knew. And when the time comes, they'll forget too. Until they join me by the fire. Waiting. For the next.